Who are you?
Bond. James Bond.
Backseat driver.
What are you doing here? Looking for shells?
No, I'm just looking.
Hang on, James.
The thought had occurred to me.
Bond, what do you think you're doing?
Keeping the British end up, son.
Switch the bloody machine off!
My name is Pussy Galore.
You expect me to talk?
No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
We don't need to go faster. We have all the time in the world.
Because I think you're a sexist, misogynist dinosaur, a relic of the Cold War.
Nobody does it half as good as you.
Can I do something for you, Mr. Bond?
Just a drink.
I may have some breaking news for you, Elliot.
Give the people what they want!
Yes, I'm actually analyzing James Bond today. And I hate to pull this card, but as a woman, oh god, I adore the James Bond movies.
Positively shocking.
All of them. The good, the bad, the downright awful, but Moonraker still has a soft spot in my heart. And I'll tell you why later in the video, but we'll get there. Don't worry. From bad CGI to the endless bullets in their 6-round guns, from the coolest gadgets of exploding pens, laser-cutting Rolexes, and ski poles that double as sniper rifles, to the most ridiculous gadgets that consist of jetpacks, invisible cars, and cigarette rocket launchers. I love it all. But something happened along the way. Call it a sign of the times. Call it a reflection of the modern era, having spilt over into a beloved action hero, who has now shifted not for the worse, not for the better, but in a way Bond was never supposed to be. And oh how the turntables when a certain reboot changed the entire Bond franchise forever. So grab your tuxedos and shaken martinis, and let's dive into it. In recent news, Amazon has purchased the rights to James Bond, and people are not happy about it, myself included. Why is that? Well, because of a certain woman named Amy Pascal. To be honest, I didn't know much about her until I looked at her filmography, and I learned she's produced some of my favorite movies like The Da Vinci Code and Angels and Demons. She's also already produced 3 different Bond films already: Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, and Skyfall. All well-made movies, right? Hold your horses. Amazon didn't have full creative control over Bond during that time, during those movies. But in recent years, Amazon did, however, gain the rights to our beloved Lord of the Rings franchise and butchered the hell out of it. It was one of those franchises that couldn't be left alone, apparently. They took too many creative liberties with it, and it looked as though they clearly just wanted to create some marks of merit, to put it kindly. And now back to Amy Pascal. When I did some more digging into the other movies that she's produced, where she's had more creative control, I started getting a bit scared. One movie in particular that stood out to me was the all-female Ghostbusters movie. But then I gave her the benefit of the doubt, because we all have our hits and misses, right? That's nothing new. But then I learned she produced the same Marvel movies that had not the worst, but not the best box office performances. And here's my own personal conclusion of Amy Pascal. She's good where she doesn't have too much creative control. But when it comes to reboots, remakes, and sequels where she's given more creative freedom, holy Lord almighty. So when Amazon gained the rights, meaning Amy Pascal is gonna have full creative control over 007, my nerves were at an all-time high when I read the public statement they put out in March. And I quote, "We are approaching every creative decision with Bond. Now, you may be wondering how I, as a woman, look at James Bond as a man. I understand that a man hitting a woman is bad. Clearly, it is wrong. No question. He hits you, you hit the road, and you never look back. And vice versa. A woman hitting a man is also very bad. I know it's used as a comedic trope in a lot of movies, with the woman slapping the man, but I never cared for that because it's such a double standard. You may be asking me right now, Audrey, why would you support a franchise like this? You're a woman, aren't you? Don't you hate how these women are sexualized and used as props? Don't you support feminism? James Bond is a misogynist. He is problematic. Listen, this guy is not going away. Bond is here to stay. Wow, that rhymed. I feel like a poet. Roses are red, violets are blue. Amazon's bit off more than they can chew. It's not thanks to me as a fan. Thank Amazon. They're the ones keeping him alive. So go yell at them, not me. Listen up. I don't know who needs to hear this, but if you don't like a movie, don't watch it. If you don't like this video, then you can click off at any time. I'm not stopping you. But people went out and continued to go and see these films because it was entertainment. One of Bond's greatest weapons is not his spy gadgets, not his guns, but his power of seduction. And oh boy, the amount of hate that this character got in the last 10 years because of that particular character trait of his, I believe played a large part into how Daniel Craig's Bond was changed in a big way. But before I get too ahead of myself, the reason I'm making this video is to inform people who are watching who the true James Bond really is. So with whatever cleaner version Amazon will put out, because we know they will, let's take a look at the true 007 agent. Let's take a step back in time and look at what really made James Bond, James Bond. Now, I'm not going to be talking about every single Bond actor and all of their stories and how they all portrayed him, because we would be here forever. Instead, we are going to be talking about a particular three that stand out in my view. Sean Connery, of course, Roger Moore, and Pierce Brosnan. I haven't forgotten about Timothy Dalton or even George Lazenby. Crap, how do you say his name?
George Lazenby.
George Lazenby. Poor guy. The reason I'm focusing on these three in particular are the ones I think have it. And I'll admit, every single one of them have had not so great Bond films, but good ones as well. So let's decipher what made their Bonds greater than the rest. Let's begin with none other than Sean Connery. Bond number 1, the very first one, the unedited, the unfiltered, the bona fide. Now this was Sean Connery's breakthrough role. When Dr. No premiered, it had mixed reactions. People couldn't decide whether it was a suspense or a suspense spoof. But then something happened involving none other than the Vatican. Yes, that Vatican. The Vatican kinda went after this movie, saying it's a dangerous mixture of violence, vulgarity, sadism, and sex, while the Kremlin, yes, the Moscow Kremlin, called it the personification of capitalist evil. They were telling everyone not to go see this movie. Let me tell you what happens next. When you tell people not to do something, what do you think they're gonna do? Both of these controversies caused more public awareness of the movie being out in theaters, and that is what caused a massive audience attendance. So really we have the old Kremlin and the Vatican to thank for the success of Dr. No. How about that?
Positively shocking.
Now, when its sequel From Russia with Love came out, it didn't have the best reception. It still made bank, but people didn't call it as lively as the first one. But when Goldfinger happened...
Who are you?
Bond.
Goldfinger was when Bond became a household name. Goldfinger was the movie that pretty much kicked off the entire Bond franchise. While Dr. No was the first Bond, it didn't gain the traction that Goldfinger did. Dr. No and From Russia with Love did phenomenal at the box office, but when Goldfinger came out,
A spider's touch
That was when Bond truly became James Bond. That was when the Bond franchise solidified. It changed spy movies forever. Every scene has some type of iconic moment. It had one of the biggest impacts on cinema, and it redefined the action movie genre as a whole. So they just started pumping out movie after movie, and the audiences just ate them up. Good or bad, and the theme songs that came along with them
So he strikes.
just became another pop culture staple for those movies. Sean Connery is the James Bond I watched the most, and I'm sure you can understand why. This man, he was the original, so are you really so shocked that I chose him as my favorite Bond? Looks-wise, it's Pierce Brosnan, because hot damn, look at him. But Bond as a character, the one and only, is the OG Sean Connery. He had magnetism and such a presence on screen where he just radiated masculinity. There is a reason audiences loved this guy, and I'm sure when Connery played Bond for the first time all those years ago, he had no idea the chain reaction he would be setting off. All the other actors who have followed after him have had to live up to his legacy, and I'm sure that was such a daunting task.
How did it happen?
I think they were on their way to a funeral.
No question about it. As I said, there have been hits and misses, and Sean Connery himself has had bad Bond films. But whenever someone mentions those three numbers, 007, Connery is the first one they always think of. And then they think of Pierce Brosnan, and then they think of Daniel Craig, and then Roger Moore, or whatever Bond you love most. But all in all, as I've said before, and I'll say it again, the original will always be better. So we're gonna do quite a big time jump, and it is now the 70s. Sean Connery is older. They're trying to find someone to carry on his legacy. But with George, after his one-time attempt at playing Bond and his voice being dubbed over, we waved goodbye to George Lazenby as quickly as he arrived.
He had lots of guts.
Poor guy. And we meet Roger Moore. People have mixed feelings on Roger Moore as James Bond, but I think his version of Bond was very reminiscent of the 70s decade. I really enjoy most of his Bond films. The Spy Who Loved Me, I think, is one of the best Bond films next to GoldenEye and Goldfinger, but that's just my own biased opinion coming out. I think this whole video is my own biased opinion. But hey, I grew up with these films. Therefore, I believe I have a say in the James Bond franchise, because when it came to censoring what my sister and I would watch on TV, there were no rules. There were no smartphones yet. Only the television set. Wow, I am just rhyming like crazy today. The Spy Who Loved Me had it all. It had everything I was into as a kid, and pretty much everything that I'm still into now. It takes place in Cairo, Egypt, showing off its grand surroundings of the pyramids and the Karnak Temple, and I, being a hopeless romantic, just took in that love story. They came from opposite sides, but they knew they had to work together to defeat Stromberg. Stromberg had the craziest shaped, most beautiful house that only a Bond villain would live in. It could rise and descend, making it an underwater home with the most stunning aquarium views ever. But remember, this is a Bond villain's home, meaning it comes with the most vicious death trap, which made me petrified of using elevators for a time. And let's not forget one of the most iconic henchmen to come out of the Bond franchise. Jaws. This guy could bite through a nuclear bomb and make it out alive. He's also why Moonraker holds a special place in my heart, because you watch this giant Frankenstein monster find love, and he becomes an anti-hero almost. Gosh, one of the most pointless character arcs in cinema, and I am here for it. He will always be the Giant of Thunder Mountain to me, one of the many VHS movies I would watch every time I went to my mama's house. I would love to know who greenlit Moonraker, because it's really bad. But I love it for what it is. And hey, it made $210.3 million worldwide. And the Frankenstein monster deserves a little happiness, even though he's killed countless people. But hey, we all have our flaws. Roger Moore made 7 Bond films altogether, and nearing the end of his run, he, similar to Sean Connery, felt he was getting a little too old to play 007. For Your Eyes Only, one of the most beautiful songs to ever come out of the Bond franchise, he was 53, and his Bond girl, Cara Bouquet, was 24 years old. And for Live and Let Die, which was actually his first Bond film, he was 45 years old, and his Bond girl, the beautiful Jane Seymour, was 20 years old. He recounted in later interviews where he felt uncomfortable having these 20-something actresses play his love interests when he himself admitted he could have easily been their grandpa, because the younger they are, the older you will look. And he noticed it big time, and so he got out of there. He was 58 years old when he announced his retirement from Bond, and understandably so. You can't have an almost 60-year-old performing dangerous stunts unless you're Tom Cruise, who at this point is just an adrenaline junkie. So now we're jumping ahead a few more years. At first, I kind of wanted to skip over Timothy Dalton, but then I realized I needed to talk about his particular short stint as Bond real quick. I want to mention something that I really admire about him, and not just his looks, because he was definitely a looker back in the day, but he's also known to be quite the avid reader, because when he was cast as Bond, he kept Ian Fleming's books on hand during filming and would use the novels as reference because he was adamant on getting the character right. And when it comes to Bond's characterization in the books, Timothy Dalton's version is the most accurate portrayal of them all. But when it came to the movie version of Bond the fans were more familiar with, I think that's why his Bond wasn't as successful. Because it wasn't the Bond everyone was used to. He was playing the Bond he knew from the books, not the Bond we all know from the movies. He may not have had the most successful Bond films, but he still made an impact. I mean, look at this behind-the-scenes photo. You cannot tell me these kids are not going to remember that day for the rest of their lives. He seems to me to be an all-around, well-read, genuine guy in real life, and you can't say that about a lot of actors. So I have a soft spot for him. I hold Tim Dalton in high regard as a very talented actor who stays loyal to the fine print. But he was also never a fan favorite, and I think that's just because he only had 2 Bond films under his belt, and not as many as the other Bond actors. But hey, he beat out George Lazenby. Poor guy. I'll never stop feeling bad for him. It is now 1995. The Bond franchise was hanging on by a thread. It was pretty outdated at this point, with the last one being released in the 80s, and James Bond was in desperate need of a revival. And in walked none other than Pierce Brosnan.
Beg your pardon, forgot to knock.
Who many called an immediate improvement over his predecessor. Damn, don't go after Timothy Dalton like that! I like Timothy Dalton, but let's not be mean here. Pierce Brosnan, dude, this actor knew his assignment and he nailed it. GoldenEye premiered in 1995 and it grossed $350 million worldwide, which would be a little over $700 million today. It was the most successful Bond film since 1979. Pierce Brosnan had it. The charm, the charisma, the sharp wit, you know, the Fab Four characteristics of Bond. Therefore, born to play him. I mean, this man radiated sex appeal like no other. I think you have figured out who my biggest Bond crush is at this point by my blushing cheeks. His next 3 Bond films received mixed reviews, but they still had that entertainment factor, and all of his Bond films still made bank at the box office, because we understand Bond is a cash grab. It is, we won't deny that. And then 2006 rolled around and Casino Royale happened. They gave James Bond the biggest rebrand ever. As I stated earlier, Daniel Craig's Bond changed in a big way. Not to Daniel's design, but to the studios, the figureheads. They knew they couldn't have Bond seducing too many women. No more of that womanizing Bond. They needed him to become a committed man. And that was only one of the big changes they made. Now, side note, also in the recent movies, you see his female counterparts begin to challenge him. And this is reminiscent of the changing times in our culture, especially with his relationship between him and M. It was always an interesting one. Throughout certain Bond films, M was pretty much the only constant woman in his life, and he has almost a maternal relationship with her, and it's prominent in the Daniel Craig films specifically, but also with Pierce Brosnan's Bond as well, where she's very upfront with him about who he is.
Because I think you're a sexist, misogynist dinosaur. A relic of the Cold War.
And at the time GoldenEye came out, it was as if they needed to pander to the audience, letting them know, or almost apologize for Bond being the way he is.
I've no compunction about sending you to your death, even with your cavalier attitude towards life.
By having M bashing his life choices.
Whose boyish charms, though wasted on me, obviously appeal to that young woman I sent out to evaluate you.
I think they knew if they were going to have Bond exist in the 21st century, he was due for some modern day changes, some updates.
Point taken.
Not quite 007.
Now, don't get me wrong, I have nothing against Daniel Craig as an actor. He carried James Bond for 15 years. People, that is longer than any other Bond actor, not counting Sean Connery, who played him only one more time after an 11-year hiatus. When I watched Daniel Craig's farewell speech to Bond on his last day of filming,
and I've had the chance to work with you guys, and that has been one of the greatest honors of my life.
I can't stop my eyes from getting watery.
I look at what I've done and go, that's part of Goldfinger. I'm connected to Dr. No, I'm connected to Live and Let Die. My tenure is what it is, but it's only part of something bigger.
He's admitted he too was getting older and had grown tired of playing the same character for so long. But he's also very clearly proud to have been a part of it. So I wanted to give credit where credit is due. So to Daniel Craig, we salute you for your service as 007 for those 15 years. For that, I will be nice to you. You have my respect. But I will not be nice to the creators behind the vision of what Daniel Craig's Bond became. Now, what do I mean by that?
You have a nasty habit of surviving. You know what they say about the fittest?
Well, let's take a step back for a moment and talk about me browsing through one of the many streaming services as an example. Whenever a Bond movie was added to a streaming service, there was always a Bond I would avoid watching. And that particular Bond I would avoid watching would be Daniel Craig's. I'm not saying I never watch his Bond films, I still do, but they've never been my go-to. And I would ask myself this over and over, and I could never understand why out of all the Bond films I would never choose his. Instead, I would choose the mediocre ones like Die Another Day or License to Kill or For Your Eyes Only, or the downright awful ones that are Moonraker and Octopussy, which, what a name, but I would never watch the well-made ones that are Skyfall and Casino Royale, and I couldn't understand why until one day when I came across a certain content creator, I won't say who, but he opened my eyes and he made one little tiny passing comment about Daniel Craig's Bond character, and it just clicked with me. It was such a eureka moment. And I want to preface this. It is nothing against Daniel Craig. I'm talking about how they wrote, or rather how they completely rewrote Bond as a character. As the guy put it perfectly, they really did try to turn him into none other than Jason Bourne. And Bond is not Bourne. Now, what does that mean? Well, let me tell you. They made Bond a serious movie. Daniel Craig's Bond became humorless. The movies were gray and dramatique. They tugged at our heartstrings, having us watch him lose everyone around him. They made him a character with dimension. Let me tell you what's wrong with that. They made him just a different version of Jason Bourne. And now I can't unsee it. I can't go back. but that had been the itch at the roof of my mouth on how I could never pinpoint as to why I never cared for Craig's version of Bond, because it's not the character of Bond. They made him another version of Matt Damon's Jason Bourne. Jason Bourne is the mindful one. He's the one who has ever really had only one love in his life. He's the spy who actually acts like a spy. He's the one who loses people around him, where it tugs at our frickin' heartstrings, where you have to watch his movies in order to understand what's happening, yet they incorporated that same style of writing into Bond, where if you watch a random Bond of Craig's out of order, you pretty much had no idea what was happening, because they wrote actual storylines for the Bond franchise. Now let me tell you what's wrong with that. Bond was never deep or meaningful. While there are plenty of serious moments in the Bond films, they still kept to that action, thrill-seeker formula. Everyone who bought their theater tickets for those films knew what they were getting. You didn't have to think too hard while watching these movies.
They'll print anything these days.
You could go into a Bond flick with its mediocre acting, listen to the new Bond theme song, watch him kick some ass, using the most ridiculous spy gadgets that you could dream up.
Stinging in the rain.
That's not funny, 007.
Watch him save the woman, get laid afterwards, and listen to the exact same closing credit theme song written for that movie. And people were satisfied. That was the peak, the height entertainment value of 007. The poker playing, tuxedo, shaken not stirred martini that I have always enjoyed watching. Not the somber, what felt like 5-part miniseries that took place with Daniel Craig. Because you would be lost at these references they would make during certain parts of the film if you hadn't watched them in order. Or that's what happened with me. Maybe I'm just a dumb blonde and I can't decipher my right foot from my left. But what I know, what I understand, is that the character that we grew up watching, this is not the Bond that we know. The Bond I know, the films I watched, would have the cringiest dialogue with that double meaning.
My God, what's Bond doing?
I think he's attempting re-entry, sir.
And I was here for it. When I turned 21, guess the first drink I ordered?
A martini, shaken, not stirred.
Vodka martini, shaken, not stirred.
If you're a Bond fan, you know. If you know, you know.
Shaken, but not disturbed.
I ordered that shaken martini and I did not like it. It was really bad. But I'd always wanted to feel like a Bond girl. I had that moment of feeling like I was in a Bond movie. I drank that entire shaken, not stirred vodka martini, even though I hated it. But I felt like a Bond girl, damn it. I may not look like one, but I felt like one.
Vodka martini, shaken, not stirred.
I'm sorry, we don't serve alcohol.
Or maybe that was just the alcohol talking, because I am a lightweight. I have a Life magazine cover celebrating 50 years of James Bond. I'm such a geek when it comes to these things. It's embarrassing. But this kind of stuff is cool to me. This is the kind of influence that 007 has had over my life. Those earlier movies had brought me so much joy and excitement. I laughed at his array of cringy one-liners.
All those feathers and he still can't fly.
Because, oh my god, the double entendres ran rampant in Pierce's movies specifically.
She always did enjoy a good squeeze.
You could never find that in Daniel Craig's movies. Like, none as blatant as those.
I see you handle your weapon well.
I have been known to keep my tip up.
And I think that is what's missing with these recent ones. Because every single other Bond, they knew what they were. They knew what the people wanted and they profited like hell off of it. In the past, they all knew we wanted more of that witty, charming man-slut gunning his way through whoever crosses him using his license to kill in order to defend England. But we have a new and improved James Bond.
Don't say it. The writing's on the wall, along with the rest of it.
Now again, Daniel Craig's movies are very well done. They are cinematic. They're well written with beautifully written theme songs. They have the stronger Bond villains for sure. And, sorry, but spoilers ahead. Click off now. But when Bond died at the end of No Time to Die, what an ironic title that was. It's as though they were wanting to kill off this entire franchise by killing off Bond. What? That's almost as bad as the Game of Thrones ending. When you rewatch the Bourne movies and Daniel Craig's Bond side by side, you begin to notice how identical they really are. You see Bond racing through the streets on a motorcycle? Well, Jason did that 5 years earlier. You see gun chases through a snowy field? Well, Jason did that back in 2007. You see him lose the love of his life underwater? Well, Jason lost her first. Specifically when he loses his love. Because years ago when I was watching Casino Royale, where he was watching the love of his life die underwater, it was that feeling of deja vu when I thought to myself, I've seen this before, but I could never place it. Until now. They copied the Bourne films. You can't tell me differently. When I want to shut off my mind after having a stressful day, I turn on a Bond flick, where you know you're not gonna cry from it.
Well, he always did have an inflated opinion of himself.
Not anymore. Now you expect to cry during a Bond film. The Bond franchise was never supposed to become a tearjerker. There's no crying to a Bond flick.
No crying!
Now, why did they change him? Why did they turn 007 into a serious series of movies? Well, I will tell you why. And I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this. The character of James Bond doesn't fit in with modern times.
Bring tears to your eyes.
He doesn't fill all the check boxes that apparently a lot of people need in order for him to become accepted by the masses today. So they needed to make him somebody else. Now, will we ever get our more accurate James Bond back?
Point taken.
Not quite 007.
The Bond who says the most knee-slapping one-liners to ever grace our television screens.
Where's your butler friend?
Oh, he blew a fuse.
Will the light-hearted comedic timing of Bond's silly little wit and seductive charm ever be seen again? Will we ever see him in his honest form again? No. We are never going to see that James Bond ever again. I don't think he was meant to go on this long. He was never meant to last as long as he has. He was created from a different era, a different time, a different culture. Call it a reflection of the times. The real James Bond is not suited for this day and age, where everyone is going to have an opinion. This whole video has been my opinion on wanting the old James Bond back.
Positively shocking.
I will die on this hill. And I didn't even get into all the other Bond villains and all the other Bond henchmen. I didn't even get into all the other spy gadgets and all the rest of the music and all the other Bond girls because, oh lord, there are so many of them. But I guess those are going to be videos for another time. I will always defend James Bond for his strengths, for his flaws, for all the happiness and the sheer delight I have felt watching these frozen in time gems over and over, listening to the most beautiful songs that have been written with care and heart for each movie, holding that appreciation for what they are in all of their many forms, where they each represent a different era of time, becoming a permanent staple in pop culture. So thank you for listening to this sort of love letter of mine, dedicated to George Lazenby. Poor guy.